In the intro to his song, Wernher von Braun, US comedian Tom Lehrer says, "And what is it that put America in the forefront of the nuclear nations? And what is it that will make it possible to spend $20 billion of your money to put some clown on the moon? Well, it was good old American know-how. That's what, as provided by good old Americans like Dr. Wernher von Braun."
There you go. Famously, von Braun, who made the American Apollo project possible, also ran Hitler's Vergeltungswaffen program, the V1s and V2s. He was then seized, or should we say recruited, by the Americans to run the US space program. Today, we look at how this recruitment of Nazi scientists began. I'm Astrid Deinhard.
And I'm Anna Deinhard.
So, hello darlings. Now, if you want to hear all of that song by Tom Lehrer, please stay with us to the end of the video and we'll play it for you.
But back to World War II. By now, almost no one can deny that the war for Germany is lost. But for some Germans, perhaps animated by Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, hope remains. This hope is often based on Wunderwaffen or wonder weapons, terrible and advanced weaponry that could change everything.
As a result, a new and fierce competition has begun based on that knowledge's power. On the one hand, the Allies tried to attain knowledge of such weapons. On the other hand, the Germans are desperate to keep any such information from falling into enemy hands, of course. It is this competition which will give birth to the controversial Operation Paperclip after the war, the initiative which brought many renowned Nazi scientists to the US after the war.
Yes, indeed. As Germany fights impossible odds, developments within the Reich take place that will influence scientific progress until this very day.
The idea of a wonder weapon to turn the tide has been pursued since the war fortunes begin to turn in 1942. While much of these proclamations are mere propaganda, the Allies fear that they could contain some truth.
Are the Germans just trying to maintain morale and scare us? Or do they truly have some rabbit they can pull out of their head, some secret and advanced weaponry so destructive it might sway the tide? Intimately familiar with what the Germans are capable of, one thing is certain. The Allies cannot and will not take any chances.
Okay, so there are many weapons which were or have been since designated as Wunderwaffen. Some truly ahead of their time, revolutionary in their own right. Some the Allies know of, like the V-weapons. V1, the first cruise missile, and V2, the first ballistic missile. V for Vergeltungswaffe, weapon of retribution.
Others they suspect but have no proof of, such as the deadly Taboon, a nerve agent working on humans as bug spray does on, well, bugs. Just a drop could result in painful death in mere seconds. Others again, they don't even suspect, like the Messerschmitt P1101, a jet fighter with a primitive variable sweep wing.
In any case, learning more about these weapons, or finding them in the first place, and discerning what's true and what is propaganda quickly become core goals of Allied intelligence work. Interestingly, one of the first operations focused only on recovering weapons and technology stems from the Western Allies' own wonder weapon program, the Manhattan Project. This is Operation Alsos.
You see, one main reason behind the Manhattan Project were the warnings from prominent scientists such as Albert Einstein that Hitler may be developing nuclear weapons and what this could mean to the world.
In September 1943, following the Allied landings in Italy, Leslie Groves, the director of the Manhattan Project, receives a troubled communique from Brigadier General Wilhelm D. Steyer, Chief of the Army Service Forces. He is worried that unless Allied efforts in Europe to locate and neutralize Nazi nuclear research programs are directed from a central position and somewhat unified, they may prove inadequate. Here, Project Alsos, a joint British-American project, is born. By December 1943, it is already operational. Do you know what Alsos means in Greek?
No,
My daughter.
I most certainly do not know. Why? Does it have some sort of poetic meaning?
Should it have a poetic meaning?
I would like that very much.
Oh, you would like that very much. No. It means a small gathering of trees. In other words, a grove.
You mean Grove as in Leslie Groves, the director of the Manhattan Project?
I'm afraid, yes. There is more to Alsos than nuclear concerns. Alsos and its agents are also on the lookout for German chemical and biological weapons developments and other advanced access technology they are able to get information about. In this spirit, by November 44, Alsos agents follow in the wake of the Allied advance eastwards.
On November 26, 1944, two members, Bill Cromarty and Fred Wardenberg, get to work in Strasbourg. As expert of chemical and biological warfare, respectively, they have one job: find out how close the Nazis are to unleashing chemical or biological attacks on the Allies. With the Battle of Strasbourg still raging and enemy artillery shells detonating around them, they enter an apartment.
This is the apartment of Professor Dr. Eugen Hagen, once a prodigal child of medicine, even nominated for the Nobel Prize in 1937 as co-inventor of the first yellow fever vaccine. However, since 1941, he has dedicated his science to the Nazi war effort using quite sinister methods.
While armed soldiers secure the apartment, Cromarty and Wardenberg scour in sheets of paper left behind. Soon, both of them find some crucial information, a letter from Hagen to our colleague, Dr. August Hirt.
Of the 100 prisoners you sent me, 18 died in transport. Therefore, request that you send me another 100 prisoners who are healthy. Heil Hitler, Professor Dr. E. Hagen. The document is dated November the 15th, 43, and soon after that, Dr. Hagen receives another 89 Sinti and Roma. 50 of them will die as a result of the experiment. The survivors of both groups await no better fate. They are returned to Auschwitz, where they are murdered.
Now, as horrible as that all is, this is not news to the Alsos men. They know that the Germans are conducting vaccine experiments on humans since 1943. The idea is to protect the own forces while unleashing biological weapons on the enemy. Any progress in that effort would be very bad news. But for now, while the discovery confirms the suspicions of research, any concrete proof of any such or similar weapons evades them.
Meanwhile, much further east, the Soviets are getting close to discovering the nerve agent Tabun and its top-secret manufacturing plant. Just 2 months after Strasbourg, the Red Army captures the castle in the small town of Dürenfurt and discovers something that brings joy to any tired soldier's heart. A wine cellar filled to the brim with bottles and caskets.
Naturally, the soldiers plunder the red gold and indulge in drink. They indulge so heavily that soon the soldiers are in a drunken stupor, and the commanders have no other choice than to halt until they can re-establish control.
Nearby, in a forest, elite Nazi commandos, lab technicians and scientists, directed by Major General Max Sachsenheimer of the Reich's 17th Field Replacement Battalion, have been patiently waiting for just such an opportunity. You see, less than half a mile from the Soviets is one of the most secret and advanced production facilities of the Reich. It is here that the nerve toxin tabun is produced and filled into munitions. The Major General has one job only: ensure the Soviets remain unaware of its existence.
While the commandos ensure that the Soviets stay away from the complex, the scientists and technicians wearing double-layered rubber hazmat suits and gas masks will scrub away any evidence of tabun, cleaning all surfaces from even the smallest residue. The more than 1,000 forced laborers and any documents have already been removed in the days before the Red Army arrives.
In the early hours of morning, the commandos open up with a diversionary artillery barrage aimed at the, by now probably very hungover, Soviets. The plan works. The technicians and scientists are in and out, any tabun scrubbed away, and the commandos fall back.
Days later, the perplexed Soviets stumble upon the seemingly innocent facility. Bewildered by the sight of pristine metallic boilers and tanks, they remain ignorant of what exactly had been produced here.
Everywhere across the Reich, whenever facilities are threatened by Allied advances, orders are given to systematically destroy all evidence and abandon the sites. Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler deals with the paper trails of the camp system, and Armament Reichsminister für Bewaffnung und Munition Albert Speer takes care of the technical and industrial evidence.
And initially, it looks like it's working on both fronts, but by early 1945, the Western Allied efforts to secure Nazi scientific knowledge gets more coordinated. A year earlier, in 1944, the combined chiefs of staff under Eisenhower begin discussing the importance of capturing all kinds of technological know-how, both civilian and military, that could be of use to the Allies.
An idea for a large centralized organization with technical experts from all sides of American and British departments and ministries is born. It will be the Combined Intelligence Objectives Subcommittee, CIOS, a joint British and American effort. By October 44, the first American member of CIOS arrive in London. In early 45, they join the forces advancing on Germany in France. By the time the Allies cross the Rhine in March 45, CIOS counts over 3,000 men and women in the field. They are scientists and experts from all sorts of British and American ministries and their own security force called T-Force. They are on the hunt for things like radar, missiles, aircraft, guns, tanks, anything that might be remotely novel or innovative.
But CIOS doesn't replace already existing units like ALSOS that continue their work in parallel or at times even in competition. Perhaps that's competition by design, because they're still all hunting for the Holy Grail, some kind of documentation of all the Nazi sciences and perhaps even a directory of all its scientists.
In fact, that grail exists and is located in Bonn, where much of the Nazi science projects are planned, tracked, and logged from the city's university. As the Allies approach along the Rhine, there is frenzied action on the campus. Panicked professors and research assistants scramble to destroy massive amounts of research and administrative documents. They do not want to fall into enemy hands.
But time is running out, and soon even the giant pile of burning papers, folders, notepacks, and books in the courtyard is not enough. They begin shoving thousands of pages down the drains in the toilets. Luckily for the Allies, a Polish lab technician salvages some probably very wet documents out of one of the toilet bowls because, I quote, they looked important.
Okay. And how right he would turn out to be. The documents he hands to the British soldiers belong to Dr. Werner Osenberg, who in 1943 was appointed by Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring to run the planning office of the Reich Research Council. Its charter reads: the leading men of science above all are to make research fruitful to warfare by working together in their special fields.
how do you know who these men of science are? Well, you make a list. And in true German fashion, this list naturally needs to be extensive, accurate, and complete. The list with 15,000. I want to, say that again. 15,000. German accuracy, huh? German scientists, their respective research facilities, and more than 4,000 projects is what has now landed in Allied hands. As a cherry on top, the list includes all the scientists' home addresses.
Whether because of some sense of duty towards German bureaucracy or as an oversight, Dr. Osenberg's own address is also on the list. So, the next logical step for Alsos' team, visit the man. At his home, beyond the man himself, they also find an even more complete and better organized version of the list in the form of over 3,000 Rolodex cards ordered alphabetically. The Alsos team is stunned. The number of leads they have to pursue has just grown exponentially, so much so that any competition with CIOS is irrelevant, and they decide to share the list with them. And what's with Miss Dr. Osenberg himself?
Well, both he and all the materials is packed up and shipped to an office outside Paris in Versailles.
Okay.
From where he will have to assist the Allies to track down the scientists and their projects. He is perhaps the first German scientist who is recruited by the Allies in this fashion.
Retrieving the doctor and his list is not the only streak of good old-fashioned luck for the Western Allies at this point. On April the 13th, the 1st U.S. Infantry, the oldest regiment of U.S. Army, by the way, somewhere west of Braunschweig, stumbles on something concealed in a forest.
Beneath a dense canopy of deliberately planted trees lie 40 or so idyllic farmhouses adorned by tended gardens. The rural appearances conceal something very technical and hyper-modern. It is the Hermann Göring Aeronautical Research Center at Felpenrode, a state-of-the-art airplane research facility loaded with tons of airplane parts, rocket fuel, and, again, a key player in the Nazi science programs. The director himself, aeronautical engineer, Dozent Adolf Busemann, which is a very funny name, if you understand German. Look it up.
This time, the happy news doesn't go to Alsos or CIOS, but to another US task force, also headquartered outside Paris and Saint-Germain. This is the One Air Technical Intelligence Team, ATI. Their focus is specifically airplanes. They were created in 1944 under the US Army Air Force's USAAF Intelligence Service, modeled on similar efforts to attain information about Japanese planes in the Pacific Theater since 1942.
Colonel Donald L. Putt, in charge of the ATI unit and renowned test pilot and engineer, races off to Germany and the Hermann Göring Institute and is elated, euphoric even, as he finds the facilities to be state-of-the-art. Or, as he will say himself, he finds it to be the most superb instruments and test equipment in the world.
Arguably, the most valuable elements are the wind tunnels that far supersede what Allied industry has managed to develop. Here, the Luftwaffe has been researching swept wing designs and their effects of breaking the sound barrier more gently. One of the planes they have developed is the Messerschmitt P1101, which we mentioned in the beginning.
Busemann informs Putt that within the wind tunnels, the Germans have been able to recreate conditions between Mach 0.8 and Mach 1.2. Putt is stunned. The Germans have breached the sound barrier. Even only in wind tunnels, this is a major achievement. Putt can hardly wait to get everything back to America to start his own tests and evaluation of the German research.
With such huge discoveries, the race to uncover Nazi technology grows. Soon, CIOS, ALSOS, and ATI are only 3 of many organizations hunting for German scientists. Alone for the research into crash sites, 32 distinct Allied technical intelligence groups are plowing through the battlefields of Western Europe.
Eventually, this hodgepodge of Anglo-American efforts will grow into Operation Paperclip on the American and Operation Surgeon on the British side. But Operation Surgeon or Paperclip will not begin until 1946. These 2 operations and the missions we talked about today are what will bring many former Nazi scientists, some with truly horrible feats to their name, to work for the Americans and British after the war.
The overall competition also goes beyond this friendly American-British rivalry. As you may have noted, any cooperation with the Soviets is altogether absent in our story. It's another sign of the widening cracks that continue to deepen as we approach the end of the war. When fighting has stopped in Europe, the race between East and West for German scientists and technology will begin. It will see Paperclip and Surgeon on one side face off with Operation Osa Vyachkim on the Soviet side, racing to recruit the best of Nazi scientists and engineers.
For example, while the Soviets have failed to discover Tambun at Deinhard, they would recruit the architect of the facility. He will help the Soviets recreate Tambun in the very factory from Deinhard, packed up and reassembled in the Soviet Union.
The race for Nazi technology heralds the fierce contests for know-how and technology that will be hallmark for the East-West conflict in the decades after the war. In the world of science and engineering, the Cold War already begins before the war ends. And while we spoke mostly of the Western Allies today, we will go back to explore the Soviet efforts in the last month of the war as well. We will also cover the post-war operations in our epilogues.
So, while there are a lot of accounts out there that overestimate the impact of many wonder weapons developed and sometimes deployed by the Third Reich, these weapons and the men and women behind them are a true reason for both concern and fascination for their counterparts on the Allied side. Besides conquering and defeating the Axis powers, capturing their scientific and industrial assets became major war goals in the last year of the war.
At the same time, the frantic attempts to destroy any evidence by the Germans are also unparalleled. It makes one wonder which unspeakable deeds were concealed and hidden, perhaps for all time. The science and scientists that the Allies will capture will be significant in things like putting a man on the moon, creating our global satellite communication network, ushering in global jet travel, and increasing the efficiency of vaccines. Alas, their work will also bring essential contributions to our ability to murder by undetectable nerve poison, kill more efficiently on the battlefield, and destroy the planet in an apocalyptic volley of nuclear missiles. Now, before we go today, let's hear that song about von Braun. So, take it away, Mr. Lehrer.
Gather round while I sing you of Werner von Braun, a man whose allegiance is ruled by expedience. Call him a Nazi, he won't even frown. Nazi schmazi, says Werner von Braun. Don't say that he's hypocritical, say rather that he's apolitical. Once the rockets are up, who cares where they come down? That's not my department, says Werner von Braun. Some have harsh words for this man of renown, but some think our attitude should be one of gratitude, like the widows and cripples in old London town, who owe their large pensions to Werner von Braun. You too may be a big hero once you've learned to count backwards to 0. In German or English, I know how to count down. And I'm learning Chinese, says Werner von Braun.
If you would like to know more about espionage operations throughout the Second World War, check out our other Spice and Ties videos. For example, do you know about Operation Sunrise, where the Allies negotiated the surrender of the German troops in Italy? If not, go check it out here.
To get ever more content like this, join the Time Ghost Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com.
Subscribe and ring that bell.
And we will see you next time.
Da, Alex.